So, in accord with Lionel's Law, that if you see it in the mainstream media, it's years old, we have an article here from NBC, it's an op-ed, which is talking about the fact that people are getting dumber. And that's not merely a pejorative, according to the writer. This actually is literally has to do with IQ. IQ in especially the United States is going down. I think it's going down mostly in most your Western countries. Now, the writer, of course, as someone who is a propagandist and not really interested in the truth, I don't think, because if you write for NBC, you're certainly not someone who's interested in the truth, more than likely. He blames global warming and says that, oh, it has nothing to do with immigrants, even though he mentions that as a factor. The thing is that we don't know specific. Here's a few truth bites for you. In the 1990s, The Bell Curve, which was an explosive book, New York Times bestseller, written by Charles Murray, was one of the first times mainstream, let's say, especially that it got the attention that it did. I mean, it had been things like this have been talked about before, but he went into IQ on every level, and yes, and he said yes, IQ scores have been declining; they have not been going up. The problem is, and he called it, I think he called it a cognitive elite. The idea that it's not so much anymore an aristocracy of heredity, where you had, titles and stuff like that in the feudal system, or even, 100 years ago. What you have now is you have, if you're smart, if you simply have hit the genetic lottery with regards to IQ, and IQ is largely genetic, that's been proven a million times and just makes sense. You can't teach dumb people to do smart things, it's not possible. But let's say you have a population that's declining in IQ, you're going to have a decline in economics, you're going to have a decline in science, you're going to have a decline in culture, you're going to have a rise in poverty and crime, you're going to have a rise in the stupidity of people. You're going to have a rise in immorality and a lot of other things. Now there's a great many factors to this. The fact that we're taking in immigrants from the third world. The third world has average IQs below 80, and for those who want to reference the if you when you start going 85 or below is when you start getting borderline retardation. It's not actual retardation, but the brain is not what it should be, let's say. Now, let's take Africa. Look at look at the average IQ from most African countries. I mean, think of Somalia, that's where Elon Omar is from. The average IQ is 68. Look at some of the other ones, the average IQs are in the 70s. If your IQ's in the 70s, you're borderline, certainly. If you're below 70, you're retarded. It's just the way that it is. Now, it might not manifest itself in the same way, but that's absolutely the case. Now, if you're going to make the argument that this has nothing to do with immigration, you're just a propagandist. You're not being honest with yourself. The United States has never taken in as many so-called immigrants in the amount of time that any Western developed nation or any nation in the history of mankind has ever done in the amount of time it has. We've taken in, I mean, for all we know, half our population could be immigrants. Or very close to that. Certainly, if the trend continues, which Trump doesn't seem to be willing to stop, stonewalled by Congress, and he has Jared in the White House. There's all sorts of reasons for it. I mean, he's just late to the game. This is not really. I mean, we need a complete moratorium on immigration, deport everyone who's illegal, deport people retroactively, anchor baby style. It's not going to happen though, because we have again, this is the problem with democracy, is that when the people become immoral and dumb, they elect immoral and dumb leaders and this is the sort of democracy commit suicide effect. The plummeting of IQs should worry anyone. But this is not a new thing. The thing is that and it is mentioned in the article that this was a turn of the century thing with regards to the 21st. But why are they all of a sudden talking about this? This is not something that we already that we just found out that it was the turn of the century. This has been known for over 50 years that IQ has been declining. Charles Murray merely wrote the book that gained a lot of traction on the subject. He wasn't the first one to talk about this. This was talked about in the 50s. This was already becoming a problem. And the thing is that no one knows why. Now hear me out on this. Remember you had the Harvard, or was it Harvard? Some of these elite universities where rich people were essentially bribing officials to get them in their children in. Huge college scandal. Just recently happened a month ago or so. With regards to something like that, it is, and those colleges admit based on IQ and affirmative action, there's all sorts of other, but the idea that you're going to have in one family from the same two parents multiple children who have an IQ high enough to get into Harvard is statistically, for the most part, impossible. It's just not the case. No, parents do not have children whose IQs are the same. For instance, if you have a child who's a genius, let's say you have a child who's a genius, all of your other children probably are not even close. Now, they might not be retarded, but they might be, average. They might even be above average. They're not geniuses, though. It's not the case. Like, look at history, at the people who were considered geniuses or child prodigies. Did they have siblings who were such? No. Did they have relatives who were such? Probably not. Maybe there's a few cases. More than likely, they were simply a sort of statistical blip. That's all it is. Now, we know no idea why that is. Here's the thing. We know that IQ is mostly genetic. We know it is non-fungible. It is impossible. It's not there's no plasticity within IQ. None whatsoever. Long term. Now, read The Bell Curve by Charles Murray, and you'll see that they have done multiple studies on children, on children before they get into the school age. You cannot change IQ substantially in the long term. It has never been done. It cannot be done. There is no study whatsoever that has ever been capable of doing it. It's never happened. Now, some people will say, oh, but look at this study. They've raised IQ. Look at it long term. It didn't last. It petered out within a few years. Or they'll say, oh, look, it lasted long term. Oh, yeah, but the thing is that it's 0.000, a really like astronomically low a statistical sort of variable. It's almost a non-existent rise or drop in IQ. It's pretty much impossible to do. Now, when he wrote the book, he did include an ethnic chapter in there. And it is interesting. People will blame, like he blames global warming, like nutrition is terrible now and stuff like that. Actually, American blacks eat better, I would think. Most people would agree. They eat much better than, even if they eat junk food, they eat much better than people in Africa. Now, can you guess what African blacks or American blacks? Who has a higher IQ, let's say, on average? It's African blacks. So it has nothing to do with nutrition. Now, of course, that depends on what particular community you're looking at. For the most part, that's true. Now there is a sort of bell curve within each community. Again, the people will say, I'm a white supremacist. Asians have a higher IQ than European whites. What are you talking about, dude? How are you, the thing is that with racial superiority, how are you even supposed to quantify it? Okay, superior, but based on what exactly? No race is superior in every possible way. Yeah, the Asians have, like a 110 average IQ. I think this is the Japanese. I think it's like 110 or something is their average. Yeah, but they're not the ones who gave us Western civilization. They have their own civilization, which, I mean, you could say it's okay, but they've borrowed a lot of their things from the West. I mean, they wear suits and ties and stuff. That's all Western. But it's very interesting to me that all of a sudden mainstream media has a problem with this. I remember Bloomberg actually also came out and they said, America is a developed country. with symptoms of a developing country. And I thought to myself, I'm sure this has nothing to do with immigration, and they're going to blame global warming. Sure enough, they blame global warming. Everything is global warming. It's the new dogma of the left, and they just makes no sense. Okay, so for the last 100 years, and people go in the comments and leave like a big long comment, I don't want to hear about it. The idea of right, the temperature's going up. Okay, great. So we have been, how long have we been measuring temperatures? About 100 years. So you're absolutely sure, without any shadow of a doubt, that the warmness that we're experiencing right now, the temperature of the climate right now, is not, and it has never been at this level for this long, or even higher for this long ever in human history. I'm sorry, but if you think that that's true, you can actually prove that, even though we've only been doing it for 100 years. Yeah, you're lying to yourself. You're also lying to me. I just find it very interesting that all of a sudden people are concerned about IQ, when in reality it's these people at NBC, it's all of these leftists who have constantly droned on about, no, everyone's equal, there's no such thing as group difference, we can't study IQ because it's racist. Well, if you were interested in the topic, you wouldn't say things like that. Now all of a sudden it's a big problem. So excuse me if I don't see this as a genuine concern of yours. People like this are concerned, I think, about things like this because they don't want to be able, they want the country to function so they can have nannies and maids, so they can be the elite. You see, they're not actually interested in the rest of the country because they're busy writing articles about how the white working class should die off.